begun. Let me see. Can you hear me okay? Yes. All right. Welcome. Well, welcome all to our first work session of the year, where we're really going to be talking about how we continue to advance framework harmonization and cloud security. And we've got a lot to walk through today. So if this is your first time joining us, hooray for you and welcome. My name is Leah McGrath, and I serve as the Executive Director of GovRAMP. And I am joined today by fantastic facilitators who probably need no introduction, but I'm going to real quickly. Jessica, our Chief of Operations and General Counsel, David Ressler, who is the Senior Director of our GovRAMP PMO. And sometimes I call him the man of the hour for, events like this. We really appreciate his expertise and the thought he brings. And Fred Britton. And if you cannot see Fred, I hope that you can see him in your screen when he's speaking, because I could not love his sweatshirt any more than I do. I have a similar one. We should coordinate sometime, Fred. It's gotten a lot of use this week with this cold, snowy weather. So I hope everyone's doing okay. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to walk through a couple of things, and this is also an opportunity where we want to hear from all of you. So feel free to use the chat feature, raise your hand, pop in questions to the Q&A. We're going to walk through some things really as an intent to try to give you, as our members of GovRAMP, updates on what's happening, what we're seeing, what we're thinking about. And it's also an opportunity for that two-way conversation where we want to hear what you think, what's important to you, and what you think we should be thinking about as well. Anything else to add? Kind of David, Jessica, Fred, we can hop right in. All right, let's do it. So there's a lot. This is a busy slide. Kind of makes my head hurt. But it's been something we've been long awaiting, so we were really excited to see this month. We're going to start off by talking about some of the updates from the FedRAMP office. This is my disclaimer where I say we do not represent FedRAMP, and if you have specific questions, I'm going to strongly encourage you to go to their website and read these on your own. What we're going to do is walk through a couple of updates, things that stand out to us in these comments, and we'll just talk about, have a dialogue around kind of what we're thinking and also some of the comments we plan on making. These are open requests for comments. There are 6 of them. If you're reading them for the first time, here's my my tip: start at the beginning. You're going to want to start with RFC 19 and work your way through. That's because they build upon one another, and there's lots of references back and forth. So start at the beginning. But with that, you'll see on this chart, we did try to pull out as well that far right column, the potential or tentative effective dates for these different policies or changes that are noted in the RFCs, these effective dates. So these are all tentative, subject to change, of course, but wanted to kind of call that out. So we begin at the beginning. And David, if you want to just summarize real quickly, RFC 19 is probably the easiest one to summarize.
Well, thank you for giving me the easy one. Yeah.
Don't worry, I'll call on you later too.
Okay. RFC 19 really is about making sure that the FedRAMP office is following the legislative requirement to analyze and report on the cost of doing a FedRAMP assessment back to Congress. In order to do that, they need the data. And RFC 19 is designed to add a spot for service providers and 3PAOs going through the assessment process for reporting how much the assessment cost. Pretty simple, as you put it, Leah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is the easiest one. If you have any questions, do click in and take a note. We do not. So someone asked, and I don't know if that was specific to something or just general. If it's general, I'm going to invite you to reach out to us and we'll have a call and walk through the differences between GovRAMP and FedRAMP. But specifically, if we look at RFC 19, We don't have that requirement, but I think it's interesting. It's a good one to think about the cost and the burden that we are, requiring if there is that requirement for an assessment. So I think that's an interesting point in RFC 19. All right. So looking at RFC 20, this is where we really want to dig in a little bit, because one of the things we're super excited about, just teaser alert, is RFC 22, because GovRAMP is named as an accepted framework in RFC 22. But to understand that, you really do have to take a look at RFC 20, right? So we're going to take a look at RFC 20 and try to dig in on this one a little bit more. Now, this is a broad table. And here is the essence of what RFC 20 is proposing. And I called it new FedRAMP terminology, but really it's moving away from FedRAMP authorized impact levels and moving to certified level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as you can see. So that table, the certified levels, description, historical FedRAMP Rev 5 categorization, that's copied straight out of the RFC. The farthest right column was our best guess based on the limited information we have as to how our program would line up if you were looking at a mapping of that. So one of the things that is interesting here, and I'm gonna invite David to talk on this in a minute, but this is one of those things that was really interesting to me. When we started StateRAMP, now GovRAMP, back in 2020 and 2021, when we launched, we actually launched with certification levels 1 and 2 and 3. And it was low, moderate, high authorization. And very, very quickly, we had strong feedback from our community that they wanted to see low, moderate impact, something aligning more with what they were used to seeing, whether they were working within a NIST, impact levels, or David, I know we've talked, many of the frameworks out there, the many acronyms of frameworks out there, whether it's CGIS or IRS or you name it, do link back to low, moderate, and high. So we had a lot of feedback. But having said that, I totally understand. And one of the things I did appreciate that was in the justification for RFC 20 is that they're trying to say, I think, and I could read it straight for you, I suppose, but I'm going to summarize. You can read it and I'll summarize. Wanted to clear up this question around authorization to operate, right? Because agencies are the ones giving the authorization to operate. And what I think FedRAMP's doing here is trying to say, we're just going to say, based on FedRAMP standards, the product is a certified level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but it's up to the agency to decide, are they good to operate? What I appreciate about that concept is that's very much the concept that we operate on as well with GovRAMP. As we say, what we do is make consistent that validation that a product's meeting a security requirements at one of our levels. And then through Conmon sharing and escalation, it's up to each of one of our participant government agencies to determine, does that meet their risk posture as well? So I get both sides of the coin here, but David, you have some opinions.
I do, and I'm not a big fan of the numbered labeling, to be honest with you, and for the very reasons that you talked about, Leah. When you're thinking about the flow down clauses that come from the federal agencies into the state agencies, things like the MARS E2 or IRS Pub 1075, those are all based on traditional NIST 853 and the FIPS 199 worksheet levels, the high, moderate, low. So in a way, it is a kind of a disservice to try to figure out the mapping between those from moderate into this new level 3 or 4, depending upon which one it is. And the other thing, and I warned you about this, Leah, when I was telling when we were talking about it earlier. If you've ever watched the movie War Games, there's a scene in there where they talk about the DEF CON level, and they got it backwards because they weren't sure if DEF CON 1 was worse than 5 or 5 was worse than 1. And I think this numbering scheme can lead to a similar situation. The other challenge that we experienced at GovRAMP was Texas utilizes a level system as well. And mapping between our level 1 to their level 1 or their level 2 became kind of untenable over time as well. So standardizing on the traditional NIST framework really helped set the playing field level across everything, and really sets the ground for harmonization with these other frameworks or implementations of the 153 that states have to do because they're receiving federal funds in certain programs.
For sure. And I definitely remember the DEF CON level 1 conversation, David, and that movie. So thank you. We do have a hand up real quickly, Drew, before we go there. One of the things that we've been thinking about when we think about, because these are open for comment, so anyone can go comment, right? Is that I think if there is this movement to certified level 1 through 6, there's probably a hybrid approach that continues to define, at least on that authorization when it's published, is it low impact, moderate, or high? And I think that will be important when we think about agencies using them, right? When we think about our participant governments and what they ask of us, we know that low, moderate, and high is super important. So I hope that as this continues to iterate, there can be, if they go that level 1 through 6, we can find a way to also pull in the traditional low, moderate, and high. But Drew, you had your hand up. Is there a question or comment related to this? And if not, feel free to also, oh,
yes.
there you go. There
Sorry,
you go.
it enabled my mic and then auto muted it. Yes, I agree
Oh.
completely with David. He's right on the money here, and it gets more complicated as you start throwing in more of the government type of certifications and frameworks in place. Like when you get into the DoD level that doesn't map one-to-one to a high, how are you planning on really addressing those extra controls that are thrown on top of your FedRAMP high security stance? Because you're looking at IL 4, 5, and 6, depending on the level of data that you're handling, along with the extra security clearances and things of that nature that don't seem to map one-to-one to what you're showing here.
I think it's an excellent point. Open RFCs. Log in.
Can we just a couple more items on this?
Yeah.
So sort of back to David's point, and we certainly have had those discussions too about our own chain of programs. And one of the challenges is we know that we are going to need to iterate. And so the locking in with number systems also leaves you in a position of, uh-oh, do I now have a 1.5 or a 1A and a 1B?
Yeah.
I mean, so,
that's a good point.
just that classification. The other thing I just want to point out is the slide has what we think will be a similar, or aligned status with GovRAMP. As we don't have all the controls and details around these levels yet, this is an assumption, so don't take it as gospel just yet.
Absolutely. And just for those, kind of as a reminder, this is what our GovRAMP security program, we have steps as well. And we found a real need to have these different steps because many of our participating governments, if you look at the progressing snapshot, well, they're not all the way. Those are products that have not achieved a verified status of core ready or authorized, but they're in use already. So we wanted to be able to have a way for that transparency and on-ramp. And that's really what our snapshot and progressing snapshot do. But you can see we've got some different steps here with core, ready, authorized, or provisionally authorized. And then that low, mod, high comes into play if you are GovRAMP authorized, right, or provisionally authorized. So there are many steps within our program that we have found to be necessary to be able to meet the needs across the community. One of the things that you'll notice if you're looking at RFC 20, and here's another view of just what Fred said, how we think it lines up, but this is our best guess based on what we've we have available to us at this point. But one of the things you're going to notice if you're looking at RFC 20 is there is no FedRAMP ready status. And in later RFC, I think it's, well, we'll get to it. I'm 22 or 23 or 24, one of those. You'll see there's a sunsetting of FedRAMP ready. And that's been a conversation we've had, is kind of a couple of things. One, what does it mean for our ready status? And two, we're looking at how do we align with some of these new levels. How does 20X fit back with ours is still a question while it's in pilot. But I want to zero in back on that question around ready status, because what we've seen has been really interesting in terms of how some of our participating governments are using ready. So I'm going to ask Jessica if you wouldn't mind kind of expanding on that a little bit, because I don't see us getting rid of ready anytime soon.
Yeah, absolutely, Leah. And there have been a couple different models, right? So what we've seen with some of our participating governments is that they feel very strongly that now that we have core, which we have heard resounding cheers over adding that step in our stair-step process, is now that they have core, some have split off and have really said, we are happy to right-size risk in two different buckets, right? The progressing is really truly that on-ramp, and then either have that product land in a core status or in that authorized, provisionally authorized bucket with whatever appropriate overlays might be needed. However, what we have also seen governments doing, which is really an interesting and unique approach, is these statuses to their data privacy classifications, right? And so what we're also seeing is this understanding, or this idea of that authorized, provisionally authorized is going to be your most sensitive data. That's going to be your restricted or your regulated data. But, core might only be that's internal. And then it's that confidential data that's landing in that ready section. And so not only are we seeing from this government perspective that there is still a desire to have that elevated level of review, to have that 3PAO assessment, but also even on the provider side, there are some providers who are GovRAMP native ready providers, right? They've brought their product through at that level because when they have personally assessed the data that is in there and what they're doing, they have felt like either it didn't achieve or need to achieve to the authorization, but we didn't have core. And so maybe that ready was the right step for them. Will that continue to be the right step? I don't know. But as we see how governments are using this and more governments are coming on and crafting their risk and authorization management programs, I do think, at least as what we're seeing, that ready status is unlikely to go away for us for a while. It's a valuable status.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's really helpful. Kate, the reason that we would see level 2 overlapping, just to answer that question, is because low impact would map to level 2. And we would argue that based on the description provided in RFC, the ready status would map to a level 2 as well. But again, that's just based on our limited information available in the RFC.
Well, and I think that actually, I love that you answered it that way, because I think that actually just highlights so perfectly what David said earlier about having these levels and using these numbers is that it really does add this gray area, not just because we don't fully know yet how it might work out, but it adds gray in the sense of you may have some duplicative steps.
Yep.
Yeah, but the good news is not finalized yet. The comments are open for the public to make comment in. All you have to do is log into GitHub, go to the FedRAMP repository, and provide your commentary. If you like it, let them know. If you don't, let them know and why. They are monitoring that actively. They have made changes along the line in some of the RFCs before they finalize based on public feedback. And this is our opportunity to make that feedback.
Yeah, Kate, we certainly agree. And we're not using the level 2. That's what FedRAMP is proposing to use. We're just trying to explain how we would see the mapping between what GovRAMP has, which is not changing, and what FedRAMP is proposing. So no, I got you. All right. So thinking about this, while ready is not going away, Jessica, I do think Fred and David, we've talked about with some of these changes, it does present the opportunity to look at our ready requirements, because we did try to keep those aligned with what FedRAMP has done in the past, just to try to keep that harmonization across the ecosystem. But I think one of the things I know that we were a little disappointed on when when everyone transitioned, when FedRAMP transitioned to Rev 5 and we transitioned to Rev 5, is that we had really hoped there would be a little more scrutiny on the ready requirements and lining that up with the MITRE ATT&CK framework risk protection values. And so I think this opens up a little bit of opportunity for us to look at those ready requirements and do a little more alignment. But David or Fred, I'll let you expand on that.
No, I think you took the words right out of my mouth, Leah. When I first saw the ready was going away, was, if that truly does happen at the federal level, I think that does open the door for us to take a harder look at, are we able to realign some of the control selection for our ready to make sure that they are the more impactful controls that are more universally needed across the board. And, I think that's the opportunity to open that up for not just ready, but some of our other programs too, that are downstream dependent.
Yep. Great point.
Just to even sharpen what David was just saying, because we have committed to this stair-step model where one program preps you for the next program, the subsets, as you move back down, ready has its controls. Core is the most impactful based on MITRE there. When you move down into snapshot, most impactful. So but that means that the limiting factor is the ready. And there may be things that are actually up and authorized that are far more impactful than ready controls that provide that opportunity down the road, with some caution about not just creating confusion and busy work over a few controls. Yeah.
But rest assured, one thing absolutely I want to make sure everyone understands is we're not announcing today that we're changing it. We are not ripping the rug out from underneath anybody on this. If we do this, we will have a very methodical transition program for those service providers that would be impacted, similar to what we did in our Rev 4 to Rev 5 conversion, where we'll have some grace period. We'll work with providers and such, because the worst thing that could happen is we just change everything, things start failing for folks. They weren't prepared for it, and we don't want to leave our participating governments in a lynch, and we don't want to leave our service providers there either.
No, well said.
Thank you.
Well, let's move on to another RFC, shall we? So RFC 21. This is also one we'd recommend taking a look at. This is sort of a catch-all. There is a lot in RFC 21. The first and foremost that we'd point out is this does clarify CSPs can only choose, and this is again for FedRAMP, not GovRAMP. We're just reporting to you, right? So for FedRAMP, they have to choose either a 20X path or Rev 5. You cannot be authorized in both. And so this clarifies that. It also does allow providers, they're going to give a path. So if you're working toward an authorization, you can be listed. You can list that cloud service offering while preparing. Now, this is interesting because this came up a lot. We actually have, this is for GovRAMP, we have a progressing product list. And that is specifically because this came up so often in our steering committee in the very early days, that we wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity to be able to be listed when you're working toward this. And now that we have our on-ramp program of the progressing snapshot program, it's given us that ability to show when you're in progress through that program, you can be listed. So kudos, get that one. It's a lot of work and you should be recognized for it. Now, the third bullet, if you're a provider out there, be advised, and again, these are open RFCs, so take a look. It does require some general sharing of product pricing information in FedRAMP. And that one I had to read. I don't know if others did. I had to read that one like 4 times because I kept thinking it was referring to the 3PAO pricing. But it's actually talking about product pricing. And that one surprised me a little bit. I don't know if others had that reaction because it felt a little outside probably what we're typically used to in the marketplace. So take a look at that if you're a provider and have questions. This next bullet, I know Jessica, David, Fred, and I were all like, ooh, interesting. I like it. And it allows companies that provide FedRAMP related advisory and consulting services to be able to be listed on that marketplace as well. And of course, there's more to it and you have to agree to things. So take a look. But I really thought that was a great idea. I don't know, Jessica or Fred or David, if you want to comment on that.
I think it really grows the ecosystem. You know, because there are a lot of firms out there that do advisory work that aren't certified 3PAOs that you know, have very quality work that they do in consulting that can help prepare an organization for FedRAMP or GovRAMP. And this gives them a marketplace to be listed, you know, in and above what we have.
Now, this is one where we don't do it yet, but I think this was a good idea that our government program may be looking at. The other reason I really liked having those who are providing the consulting or advisory services listed is it also helps inform us. Who do we need to be reaching out to from an education standpoint to make sure that they're kind of in the know? Tony, hand up. Did you have any comments on this one, Tony?
I think we have to unmute him.
Oh, sorry. Let's see if there's a way to unmute Tony. Tony,
I think I did. Tony, you should be able to speak.
Yeah.
Oh, well
Thank
done,
you.
well done. Sorry about that.
Sorry. I'm not against this, but I would put up a cautionary tale and more from the government side. Because when you start listing consulting services and you put a standard to it, you're putting liability on the government, and you would be accepting that if you do the same thing for government. And that's the only thing I caution. Because then you open yourself up to, well, you're playing favorites or the standards are unfair or what have you. Personally, at risk point, I don't care. We have all the qualifications, we can do it, but it is something that we need to be aware of from in general, right? Because there's going to be those companies that raise those issues.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great call out, Tony. And I think that's something that we work really, really hard at here is to ensure that in this community, we are not looking to say that we have favorites or play favorites. And so I really appreciate that call out because it's something we should absolutely be considering. I see a lot of chatter in the chat around the CSP pricing piece. I'm not surprised by that at all. Let me see if I can unmute Brian here. Hold on.
Thank you. See, Brian, are you able to join us? And then we'll go to Jody. Yes, Brian Conrad.
This is Jody. I have a question about the advisory consultants. Like, what is the evaluation going to be for them? Or are they just going to be listed and there's going to be no evaluation? So we don't know what the level of security or privacy or what their validation is for their certifications they may have or not have. What's that going to look like? Because I haven't read these, so I'm just curious because that'd be a concern of mine from, of course, a CJIS standpoint as well as many other standpoints. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that's why I thought it was interesting to have them listed because right now we don't know who is doing all of those advisory services. In the RFC, I believe, but we can follow up and give you the exact language, but I believe, you know, really they have to be listed, they have to share similar information that the 3PAOs do in terms of what they're charging for that. It's more around cost. Yep. Great point. Yeah. And Bobby makes a point in the chat, Jody, you know, for the 3PAOs, they go through a pretty a pretty rigorous, which is why we rely on that too, process for accreditation through A2LA. So I think there is a good cautionary discussion here. Brian, if you're unmuted, join us, my friend. Or just kidding. All right. Well, Brian, if you're able to join us, please do. I'm so sorry about the mic issue. But we will go ahead. Anything else before we move from this? The last but not least, that last bullet point. But there's more in this RFC. Like I said, there's a lot in here, so take a look. There are some time targets. David Ressler called them, I loved this, not SLAs, but SLOs, right? Service level objectives that they've set for responding.
And Leah, just back to that first bullet around picking. Are you doing a 20X? Are you doing a Rev 5? This is where it's important. I mean, we don't want to interpret things that are coming out of the FedRAMP office, but we know there is one of the big questions is how are agencies going to feel about adopting 20X? So if you're out there thinking I'm going to pursue FedRAMP, I think watching that conversation as FedRAMP continues to move on 20X and some of the outreach they do is pay good attention to where are agency adoptions, because it may be the case that there's some that want to go one way and not the other. And I think that's a problem the FedRAMP office will have to tackle down the road.
Absolutely. Nick Peters.
Yeah, I also kind of wonder if they'll introduce some sort of delineation at some point with respect to authorized 3PAOs and just organizations that provide security and consulting services. Because I know companies out there that are A2LA certified as assessors and have no intention of ever conducting a FedRAMP assessments. They do it for the ability, I guess, to throw some credibility behind providing consulting services.
There was some hint of that in the RFC language.
And based on Brian Conrad's comments in the chat, I think that's sort of the point he was making too. Like, bear in mind, they can do both, right? Many of the 3PAOs do some advisory services too. So thank you, Nick. Well, now are we ready? Are we ready? Drum roll, please, to get to RFC 22. Let's keep on rolling. So now that you understand some of the changes, right? FedRAMP's proposing these different level statuses and some changes to the marketplace, we get to RFC 22. And this is where we should take a moment. And if we were all together, I might pass out, cake, not chocolate cake, white cake, chocolate cake, whatever you want. And just say, woohoo, hooray. We're very excited to see that GovRAMP was listed as an approved framework in RFC 22 for, it's almost, it reminds me a little bit of like our fast track program, right? Like, hey, if you have this, you can fast track into what they're calling a level 1 status. Thank you for the applause. I love it. If we were in a room, we'd all take a bow, and all of us together collectively, I think, have really helped make this happen. And so really excited to see this opportunity. So this is an interesting one. So RFC 22, what it's doing is allowing for a few of the different frameworks they've listed, GovRAMP is one of them, to be able to have this path in to be able to achieve a FedRAMP validated level 1 certification. This is great news for many of our, what we sometimes call native GovRAMP authorizations, those who are only in our ecosystem, and that's growing and we love it. So this is a really cool opportunity for many of our providers who've got products that are GovRAMP authorized to be able to start being listed, right? To have that validation. There are a couple things that this RFC says that we wanted to walk through so you all are aware of it as well. Of course, all the other RFCs apply. So it links back to RFC 21 and there are some back and forths. One of the things that it does, and this is also listed in RFC 20 is, and the reason it does this is it's if you are a part of this program, if you use this to get into that level 1 certification, The way the RFC is written is it requires the provider to then move into process to become, to utilize the 20X authorization process. I didn't probably say that very clearly. So David, why don't you give it a shot?
Yeah, so yes, that if you have a GovRAMP authorization or a provisionally authorized package, once this RFC becomes finalized, it would give you a pathway to enter into the 20X program. Unfortunately, it does not give you a pathway into the legacy Rev 5 program, which I believe is one of the things we intend to provide feedback on, because there is a more direct mapping from our Rev 5 program into the FedRAMP Rev 5 program. Did that?
Yes, I think you
Okay.
did a better job. Thank you. So there are a couple of other things in this to take a look at, and we're going to dig in, but they also have introduced a 3-strike rule. And this is interesting. You see some of this when in the last RFC where FedRAMP said, here are timelines to review things. They're really going to be saying like 3-strike rule would be if you're using this pathway in, you've got to get it right. You know, you have 3 strikes and then you're out and you can't use this pathway in terms of you've got to submit full, I'm going to say full packages for lack of a better description, but you got to meet all the requirements, right? And I think what they're trying to get at is we don't have time or resources, which I can relate to, we can all relate to, right? To be getting incomplete packages. So this is one pathway where they are talking about 3 strikes kind of and you're out. So something to take note of, and it only applies for low impact and low risk only. So a couple of other things just to dig into some of this. So some of those requirements, what would that quote complete package look like? The first 3, hey, we're really excited, we can help you with, and that is the mapping to KSI. So they do require that if you're coming through this, you need to map to their key security indicators, which in RFC 22, they said will be changing or being renamed, or there were some different discussions. So stay tuned as to what those KSIs actually are. But we've been doing a lot of mapping, and kudos to Fred and David and teams who've just really taken that on to be looking at, we're trying to keep tabs, even though it's pilot and it's fluctuating, we're trying to keep tabs on, okay, what are these KSIs? How does it map to NIST controls? How does that map to our program requirements? So if you find yourself, if you're a provider and you're thinking, hey, I have a GovRAMP authorization, I want to take advantage of this, give us a call. We want to help you. We want to work with you and learn together. So help with those mapping of KSIs. The nice thing too, you do have to make those full materials available. You can do that, we believe, straight from our working with our PMO, just the way that you would grant access to any of our government agencies now. We'll work with you on that process so you can provision access so they can see all of the documentation we've already got stored and available. And then, of course, it says may, it's not a requirement. I thought this was interesting. So they're saying you don't have to have a FedRAMP 3 PAO that has done this work, but if you're part of our program at Ready or Authorized, you do have a FedRAMP 3 PAO. So that's a good check the box. Some of the other requirements we already mentioned, well, kind of administrative stuff. And then also that you've got to be in process for 20X. So what does that mean? We do have some ideas. This is an open RFC. So we're going to throw out some of our ideas for what we plan on commenting, because we comment through these RFCs as well. So if you would so like to comment, we're going to encourage you to do so. And we're going to give you these bullet points here. But if you have further ideas, please feel free. And first and foremost, we'd really like to see, you know, the allowance of not just into 20X, but also to that Rev 5 authorization. I know I've seen some chatter in our chat around, is Rev 5 sunsetting or going away? That's been communicated before, but now it's pushed out, and now they're going to continue doing Rev 5 authorizations. And when we look at the intent, why are they doing RFC 22? If you read RFC 22, it's about growing the marketplace. And so we think allowing that path for Rev 5 authorization, not just 20X, is kind of the easy button, right? Like we have so many that are already based on this Rev 5 that it's going to grow that marketplace faster And also, from what we're hearing, that's still what a lot of the agencies are looking for. While 20X is in pilot, they're looking for that Rev 5 authorization. We'd like to see GovRAMP Core and GovRAMP Ready. Remember the mapping, the tentative mapping we did of what are their levels to our statuses? How does that work? We think there's definitely a place for GovRAMP Ready and GovRAMP Core based on what we're reading their levels are and the intent of this. That third bullet, we hope this is just a starting point. It's not going to stop at level 1. It's not going to stop at low impact levels. That we will be really helping, hoping to recommend a faster path for those higher FedRAMP certifications where applicable. So where we have a GovRAMP authorization at the moderate impact level, let's get to that higher level 3, for example, or however these flesh out. This last one, we've had a lot of conversation around. And in fact, if you were a part of the FedRAMP working groups a year ago, they actually had a working group that was titled harmonization or something like that with other frameworks. And there was a lot of chatter in that actually around this conversation too of SOC 2 Type 2. And we're going to recommend in our comments that SOC 2 Type 2 not be an acceptable framework for that level 1 status. And now again, I'm going to pick on David. Because we just had this conversation earlier today to really talk about why. Why are we saying, hey, this is awesome. We love where you're going. Take a little caution with the SOC 2 Type 2.
Yeah, so I used to do SOC 2 in a former life, back when it was, the SAS 70. And one of the things that, becomes very apparent very early on, is you can easily scope things out of your SOC 2 report. And so the thoroughness of a SOC 2 report just isn't there like it is with a NIST 853 based assessment. The other material thing in the SOC 2 report, there's no continuous monitoring. It's, a point in time, which is exactly, the genesis of the 20X is to make it a continuous monitoring function. The SOC 2 is a point in time. You do it every 3 months, you do it every 6 months, or you probably more likely do it every year. But there's an attestation period that's retroactive, and you do it for whatever time until you have a clean report. Then you start doing it longer periods of time. But without the continuous monitoring aspect, you don't really have the visibility to see if the service provider is continuing to live the life that they say they live. And that is really the value proposition for our program.
Any other comments or things that you all think we should be, including in our comments on RFC 22, or thoughts that you have? Feel free to reach out. If you noodle on it a little bit, you can reach out to us anytime, or raise your hand, drop them in the comments. We'd welcome them. If you are in our program and are interested in thinking about how to leverage this once this comment period is complete and this moves forward, if you're interested in leveraging this path, please reach out. We'd love to help assist and learn through that process. All right. There are 2 more RFCs we'll just cover kind of quickly, and that is RFC 23. Again, they restate ready as being phased out. We kind of knew this. If you read the other RFCs, you pick up on this point, but RFC 23 explicitly says, hey, it's going to phase out. July 28th of 2026 is what is proposed there. If you have a ready, though, read that. There is like a time period where you would stay on. They're just not going to be, I think, adding any more new ones at a certain point is what they're proposing in RFC 23. They also in RFC 23 have a window. It's like a limited time opportunity through December. I think it was December 16th is what they proposed, where if you are wanting a Rev 5 authorization, you can come through the FedRAMP office without a sponsor. But they will be giving some prioritization to GRCs, and it will not apply for a high impact level, only levels 1 through 4. All right. So now we talk about RFC. Ooh, I see some good questions. I'm going to finish on RFC 24. David, would you like to hit this one?
Sure.
And I'm going to check the chat.
All right. So RFC 24 really applies to just Rev 5, and it's pushing service providers towards providing their packages in a machine readable format. For the most part, that's going to be OSCAL. There is a comment, I believe it is in the same RFC, about if there's 5 or more service providers with a alternate format, they would entertain that as a also accepted machine readable format. And as I promised Leah earlier, I'll point out that the GovRAMP package, ever since we introduced Rev 5, in its Excel format, is both machine readable and human readable format.
We do have on this question, and this comes from the chat from Tony. And I did, I read this, but I honestly skimmed over this, but it's a really important question to many of our 3 PAOs and members. And that is, what is GovRAMP's opinion on the threshold for 3 PAOs as trusted certifiers and validators requiring at least 3 initial authorizations every 12 months? I think this is trying to get at kind of that question of separating out the 3 PAOs who do many of the assessments, right?
Yeah, I personally think this is one of those cases where if you think back, what was it, 2 years ago, when the Defense Authorization Act essentially legislated the requirement for FedRAMP. And there was a lot of service providers out there all at once trying to find a 3 PAO to start partnering with and going through the process. Delisting a bunch of 3 PAOs who have gone through the trouble, the expense, and the hassle of becoming accredited, even though they're functioning in the advisory function, limits the future marketplace for 3 PAOs. And I, for one, like having alternate choices to turn to, and having a robust marketplace to choose from. Because I think there are some of those 3 PAOs who are doing more an advisory function that, in the right circumstance, would be able to backfill in and jump in. So,
Yeah.
just my personal opinion.
Yes, these are not representative. What is it what we need to put on our, if you have X still, your profile? Tony, what are your thoughts?
And I've already made comments on the RFC about this, but I'm not necessarily against requiring 3 PAOs to demonstrate technical competence in doing the assessments. Just because you are accredited doesn't necessarily mean you know what you're doing, because you haven't learned through the school of hard knocks and things of that nature. So I'm not against the idea, but I think the standard they've initially set, and me and other 3 PAOs have already made comments on it, is needlessly restrictive. Because how hard is it for, especially in the FedRAMP world, to maintain 3 brand new assessments every year? So what my comment was, as long as you can demonstrate through any type of FedRAMP assessment, whether it's a FedRAMP Ready, FedRAMP Initial, FedRAMP Annual, or an SCR assessment, because the idea here is for the 3 PAOs to demonstrate technical competence in performing the assessment. So that was my suggestion in the comments. I haven't looked on the GitHub to see if there's been any likes to it, but others have also too, because what this calls the question is that needlessly, again, restricts the number of 3 PAOs, and then you're intentionally creating the same issue that CMMC has with how many accredited C3POs there are against the pool. So
the volume.
Yep.
Great point. All right. Kate has some questions that are specific to GovRAMP acceptance of POAMs. Really asking, can they use an EMAS POAM in lieu of the POAM spreadsheet in the package?
I think we would need to see what your EMAS POAM format looks like prior to saying yes or no. Because there's some things in the current GovRAMP POAM spreadsheet that does things such as calculating due dates and the like that are then triggers for deficiency triggers. We do some analysis on the POAMs to see, are you chronically late or not? We want to make sure, as I mentioned earlier, the service providers are living the life. That is the whole point of doing POAMs and making sure that you're meeting the timeframes listed under RA5. It depends. And I know
It's maybe. That's
Yeah,
such a David no, I'm kidding. It is a David answer. It's the real answer though. But Kate, maybe we can connect on that. And when I say we, of course, I mean David and his team can connect with you to walk through that question. It's a good question. So we appreciate you bringing it to us. All right. So we've kind of gone through the RFCs, as we took a big step back and started thinking about, we try to look at this in terms of the bigger universe, right? We know at GovRAMP we're operating in a universe where our participating agencies, our governments, and our providers are needing to, show how they conform or comply with a lot of different requirements that flow down to all of you. And so we kind of took a step back and we said, okay, for any future modernization, what are the core tenets here that we want to make sure we're recommending? And so you're going to see these 5 pillars, and you've heard them from us before, but we're going to keep talking about them. And that is, hey, don't walk away from NIST, right? Continue to align with NIST. We see a lot doing that, either at the government agency level, state, federal, local, you name it. A lot of the different requirements and frameworks out there that apply, whether it's FBI, IRS, and so forth, many point back to NIST. And so continuing to drive that alignment we think is important. Number 2, we really are going to continue to advocate to rely on those evidence-based studies and to think about metrics driven. So we really leverage that MITRE ATT&CK framework study. And we're going to be looking at how we continue to lean into that and think that's a really important opportunity that we all have collectively, is to be thinking about, we have so much more information now, right? So how can we lean on data-informed metrics that tell us what are those controls that matter most? 3, easing the burden on agencies. So allowing agencies, just like we do for states and locals, to be able to leverage our shared services of continuous monitoring. I think there's a real opportunity for the federal agencies as well to be able to clarify they can leverage that too. And there's a huge value add, we think, for the providers who are serving across the different government levels. 4, to remember the small and medium-sized businesses. Our on-ramp program really helps with that. And we think that we need to make sure that we're not overburdening. And last but not least, back to RFC 22, we want that process. We're so excited to see where things are starting. We hope it doesn't stop. We want to see more rapid process for the higher FedRAMP certifications where equivalency is appropriate. All right. Anything else, David, Jessica, Fred? We do have one more thing we want to talk about, if we have time, and I know we've covered a lot. But anything else on this?
Nope.
All right. So where do we want to go from here? I know we just switched gears on you really quickly, kind of like whiplash. We've been talking about the FedRAMP universe a lot today because a lot dropped. There are several open RFCs. We encourage you to take a look at those. We know the impact it has on the community overall. One of the things, though, that we're certainly having a lot of conversations about, it's being brought up almost daily in calls that we're having, is, hey, have you taken a look at what's happening with CMMC, right? How does that align with GovRAMP? We know there are some differences. And I was talking to a friend of mine today who was saying, hey, there's harmonization, there's recognition, there's reciprocity. How do we recognize the work from a CMMC into GovRAMP and vice versa? Is there a way for us to leverage the work being done? And so this is something that we want to invite, if any of you have interest and having kind of a subgroup conversation. We'll bring it back to the full group, but we want to have a smaller group where we really dig in to this opportunity. Please email me. I'll be the keeper of the emails, but I promise I'll invite some of my team members to help me manage, because sometimes it gets away from me. But email me to get started, and we're going to be pulling together some little breakout sessions, and we think there's a lot of opportunity. David, you described this so well, so I'm going to lean on you. Bring it home with the CMMC.
All right. So Lee and I were talking, well, what, last summer, right? Regarding the 171 and the fit into the 853. And one of the things that we talked about was, wouldn't it be awesome if the 171 controls really did map into the 853 and just became a control selection? A couple months ago, I saw that same thing posted on a LinkedIn chat as, what's in scope for the future of the 171. Unconfirmed, but wouldn't that be awesome? Because then you would have true harmonization of the control language. They're very close now in what's in the 171 also fitting in the 853. Obviously, there's more things in the 853, but if it just became a control selection catalog against the catalog of the 853, it would simplify the service providers' lives immensely that need to do both.
All right. So I hope I have lots of emails in my inbox. We're gonna be digging into CMMC, and we invite you. So we'll keep talking certainly about what's happening in the FedRAMP environment that's relevant, but we're going to start shifting a lot of our focus here to CMMC. Yes, Drew, I'm signing Drew up. Thank you, Drew. You just volunteered yourself with that comment. So appreciate you. But we really, one of the things that just kind of to end, because this was really interesting. We had a steering committee call last week, and someone said, Leah, I think it's really important to explain how is GovRAMP different in all of this, right? There's so many moving parts. What's going on? How is GovRAMP different? And I really appreciated this question from our steering committee member. Because, I think what we've learned is the difference that we're providing is becoming increasingly important when we have state and local governments, agencies at the federal level too, right, who don't have the staff or budget or bandwidth to do the kind of ongoing reviews that really this cybersecurity warrants. And so where there's a shared need, there's an opportunity for that shared service. And that's what we have is I think the difference is really in the continuous monitoring, the ongoing risk management, that proactive escalation and notification out to our participating governments. And I think that's how we can really do this together, is through that standardization. And I hope, our dream is that this is simplifying things for the provider community as well. So we've got that commitment to all of you to keep listening, to keep innovating, that commitment for that metric-driven security, and to not lose sight of our core value and difference that we think we bring, which is that shared service and ongoing continuous monitoring and escalation to the community. So always appreciate our steering committee keeping us true to ourselves. So with that, anything else? We've hit our time. Okay, we're a minute over. I'm so sorry. We've hit our time. Anything else for the good of the cause? Jessica, David, Fred.
I was just hoping you would mention the events.
There you go. We've got some cool events. We have our symposium March 9th. And if you haven't, mark your calendar. We're going to have a great time in San Antonio, Texas, November 15th through 17th. And look forward to seeing all of you in the next few months in person, hopefully. And here again soon, we'll be announcing our next meeting, likely in the March timeframe. So stay tuned, and thank you for joining us. Have a great weekend. Bye, all.